Okay, so our service today is about being godly leaders, and we're going to go through Ezra 6:13 through 22. Okay, so we're going to have introduction, which I'll start the lesson, explain what it's about, then I'll go into a background of what the story is, and then we're going to talk about the temple of God, which is very important for this lesson, and then we're going to observe and conclude what we should take like for the message of the lesson. So here we go. So in Ezra 6:14 it says, "The elders of Jews built and prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they built and finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia." Okay, here we go. So introduction. So through the prophets, God has given his prophecy that the children of Israel would go into captivity for 70 years because of their sin. Very sad. All right. So our lesson shows God has moved on the hearts of the pagan rulers as well as his own people to get them out of captivity and back to the promised land. So once they're back home, the Israelites were able to rebuild the temple and reestablish the prescribed worship at Jerusalem. Out of the chaos of defeat and captivity, God was restoring worship and great joy to his people who were led by his godly leaders. So, the background for the lesson. During the reign of Persian King Cyrus, he allowed many Jews to return to Jerusalem who laid the foundation of the temple. However, work had stopped on the temple until the second year of King Darius, which was about 520 BC. Yeah, about 16 years later. So, there was both outside and inside opposition that caused delay. But eventually the temple is finished, and through the cooperation by Persian officials and other encouragements to rebuild the temple. So let's look through these verses. So the completion and dedication of the temple. So Ezra 6:13 through 15. Then because of the decree King Darius had sent, Tantaniah, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar Bozenai and their associates carried it out with diligence. So the elders of the Jews continued to build and prosper under the preaching of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah, a descendant of Iddo. They have finished building the temple according to the commandment of God of Israel and the decrees of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. The temple was completed on the third day of the month Adar, in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. So they worked on it for many years. That shows how dedicated they are. And they want to show the appreciation of completing the temple. So they had a joyous celebration and the assignment of priests and Levites. So Ezra 6:16 through 18 says, "Then the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles celebrated the dedication of the house of joy. For the dedication of this house of God, they offered 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 male lambs, and as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats, one for each of the tribes of Israel. And they installed the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their groups for the service of God at Jerusalem, according to what is written in the book of Moses." Cool. Okay, so then the Passover is observed. So with the preparations by the priests and Levites in Ezra 6:19 through 20, and the celebration by the people in Ezra 6:21 to 22. So it says the Passover on the 14th day of the first month, the exiles celebrated the Passovers. Yeah. And the priests and the Levites had purified themselves and were all ceremonially clean. The Levites slaughtered the Passover lamb for all of the exiles, for their relatives and priests, and for themselves. So the Israelites who had returned from the exile ate them, together with all who separated themselves from the unclean practices of their Gentile neighbors, in order to seek the Lord, the God of Israel. For 7 days they celebrated with joy the festival of unleavened bread, because the Lord had filled them with joy by changing the attitude of the king of Assyria, so that he assisted them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. So, pretty much, like, the whole thing is saying that these Israelites, they were in captive for 70 years because they did not follow what God told them to do. They sinned, they turned away from God, even though God's been with them and helping them. So a lot of people weren't able to reach the promised land, which is very sad, but that was their punishment. And now God finally thinks that he should help his people, because they've been punished enough and they're turning back to God now. They're like praying to him and stuff. So he's like, maybe it's about time to guide them back to the promised land. So now they're in captive, but God like blessed, or like he kind of like convinced the king to let the Israelites go back to their land. And so they let thousands of these Israelites to leave, and finally they were able to go back to, which was ruins of a temple, and they're able to was it ruins? It could have been, but they could have just built a temple. So anyways, they went back to their lands and they built the temple, but it took many years because there was a lot of stuff trying to fight against them to make sure they didn't build the temple. But eventually they focused and they got their temple finished, and they had this huge celebration because finally the house of God was completed. And that huge celebration was, you heard like hundreds and hundreds of animals were sacrificed, and even the 12 male goats, which that is a lot of sacrifices. That really shows that they were like happy and stuff. So yeah, and now they celebrated Passover too, and also they're giving the priest roles and stuff so that they can keep the temple pure and clean. So, concluding, this story is kind of important because many believers simply go through the motions of worship and they don't get like joy. They just go to church on Sundays, like they just do it just because it's like routine, right? But we have to, like, when we're like praising God and stuff, we have to feel a joyful worship and feel a connection with God, like we're friends, right? And so by confessing and saying that we're sorry for our sins and asking for forgiveness, we're able to like connect, right? And once we have that connection, we're able to have a better relationship and become better friends with God. And then we can get like if you're with your friends, you have fun, right? We can have fun with God, and that's what God ultimately wants. He wants us to be with him and us to be happy with him. So we just need to seek God's guidance and listen and obey him, but also have fun doing that. And yeah. Okay, well, that's our lesson. So see you guys next week.